Boo! Haha, did I scare you? It's okay to admit it, it was very spooky. What better way to spend Halloween than with the spookiest monster of them all, Joker?
Terrifying.
He's got a scythe and he wears cool gloves that definitely would have got him bullied if he went to my school. He's also a clown. That's what we in the biz like to call the trifecta. Joker's theming is a bit disjointed because half of the monsters with him as a subbreed are spooky skeletons and demons, and the other half are even spookier clowns.
Terrifying.
Monster Rancher is a game where an old man invites you to go to an active volcano and you say yes, and then you find a cursed mask that everyone knows is cursed, and then you show it to your grandpa and he immediately puts it on because he doesn't trust the meds that the nursing home has been giving him. There's nothing scarier than elder abuse.
Terrifying.
Anyway, enough preamble. This video is about my buddy Eric. If Pixie is a glass cannon, then Joker is like he's a howitzer made out of fontanelle. Why did I write that? What the fuck? Like the Valve logo, but I guess it's like a baby with like a mortar sticking out of his head. I don't know. He's all offense and no defense, but also like no speed. He has to hit first to win, and if he doesn't, then he just explodes. And that's exactly how he works in the single player game. Maximum intelligence and skill gains means it's very easy to raise a damaging and accurate Joker. Chances are you fought a Joker before you unlocked him, so you were privy to the knowledge going in that he's a predominantly intelligence-based monster, and you might have been a little bit disappointed with the 2 power attacks he starts with. He's got an average guts rate of 13, which obviously isn't fantastic, but at least it's usable, and the best life type in the game. The Type 4 sustainable life type means Joker spends most of his time in max or near max stat gains, which is great because his lifespan is garbage. At 350 weeks, it's the lowest in the entire game, tied with a few others, and if you're still having trouble keeping your Joker alive, then you're not alone. It's a feature, not a flaw. Well, it's a flaw. It's a pretty big flaw. But rumor has it there's a video out there to help keep your Joker alive for as long as possible and maximize those gains. You gotta maximize the gains! So, spoiler alert, I know you. I know all about you. How spooky is that? I know you're sitting there like, hey, Moose, I know all about Joker. He's good as hell, and Death Energy is a great tech. Thanatos and Carmine are always scary to fight, and that move is busted. Was I right? I was, wasn't I? Oh, no. But you know who wasn't right? You fool. You are the real Joker here. Outside of the context of casual play and you forgetting to invest into speed until your monster was too old to get any meaningful gains from it, the enemy Jokers of your childhood are completely separated from their true potential as competitive powerhouses. Joker's power techs are arguably better than his intelligence techs, and the inability to get rid of his basics really fucks up his intelligence build under a stat cap. So let's start with those, shall we? Death Punch is one of the best basics in the game. It may not look impressive at first glance with D Force and C Hit, but 16 Force actually places it in the top echelon of all the basics in the entire game. The real strength here is in the Withering though. With the chance to drain 15 guts at max from your opponent every time you land the tech, you'll get plenty of chances to whittle down your opponent without giving them a chance to retaliate. Death Punch is one of the best basics in the game. It may not look impressive at first glance with D Force and C Hit, but 18 Force actually places it in the top echelon of all the basics in the entire game. The real strength here is in the Withering though. With the chance to drain 15 guts at max from your opponent every time you land the tech, you'll get plenty of chances to whittle down your opponent without giving them a chance to retaliate. Yeah, I reused the script. Who cares, man? Tecmo pretty much reused the move wholesale, so why don't I get to do the same? But that's about it for the sameness in his kit, which is good if you're one of those varieties to spice of life people, because believe it or not, we're a third of the way through his techs already. Death Slash is Joker's heavy tech, and it's about as heavy as a heavy tech can be. Decently expensive, but not prohibitively so, this move boasts game-ending potential at any stage of the fight as long as you're willing to stomach the risk. 42 Force and 29 Withering play into Joker's game plan of not allowing for a comeback once he goes on the offensive, and while 11 Sharpness isn't fantastic, the Fame and Bad Natured stress bonuses prop up your crit rate to a pretty commendable 21%, which is often just straight up overkill when it procs, unless it's the very first move you land in a match. The minus 16 hit is what reels in this move's otherwise overpowered numbers. 34% chance to hit is obviously not great, and in fact it's really not great. It's one of the most not great moves in the game accuracy-wise. A lot of techs that have a hit rate this low are massive gambles, and usually 42 Force wouldn't be enough to justify it, but coming off of Joker's average guts rate and his contingency plan of marching towards a KO with his significantly cheaper but still powerful basics, the 29 cost is worth the occasional swing. 34 chance to, at worst, lose guts you can build back in about 10 seconds, and at best just straight up hand you the victory isn't that bad of a deal. Death Cutter is Joker's big intelligence nuke, and it's kind of, like, it's fine, I guess. It's okay. Joker doesn't really have any bad techs, or does he? And Death Cutter definitely isn't a tech I'd call bad, it's just that you really need to rely on crits if you want this to actually be impactful. It's only like 15% stronger than Death Energy, but you do have a 30+ chance to crit. Even then with the crit, it's still only a B-Force tech at 36.4, so it's not always a one-hit kill. It's almost never a one-hit kill. That said, this tech is still good for the cost, and definitely gives you more than 28 guts worth of value given the high withering and average hit chance. Just temper your expectations a bit for when you don't land a crit. Death Energy is a move we all know and love, or hate. It's insanely accurate, and you've got memories of it instantly dunking on whatever monster you manage to hobble together to try and take on S rank. But the thing is,
it's not a big deal.
Don't get me wrong, like the rest of Joker's kit, these numbers for 28 guts are actually really solid though. An okay amount of damage, extremely high hit percent, decent withering and sharpness. This is Joker's most reliable tech, and 90% of the cast would love to have it. But 28 guts isn't nothing. It's not super expensive, but considering this is the same price point as Cutter and Slash, it becomes clear that its usefulness lies within its ability to deal small amounts of damage with a high success rate, not necessarily in its ability to control the match. Death Energy, despite its consistency, is actually slightly more niche in its use than Death Cutter and Slash, which, while riskier, basically perform exactly how you'd expect them to no matter when they're used. Death Energy is great for ending games as its usable damage and high accuracy are perfect for securing victories. As a round opener, you've set yourself up to do some chip damage and allow your opponent a small guts lead. Guaranteed damage is always good, which is why I really want to emphasize the consistency this tech has, but there's a time and place for Death Energy to really shine, and used out of order or in a situation that doesn't call for it, you can end up watching your opponent strengthen a lead or just shrug it off and retaliate. The move is still good, it's just not what you remember from your childhood. Death Final is Joker's special tech and it's his most potent finishing move. S-Force and Withering usually means that if it doesn't outright kill, it at least, it loses you the fight. Is that right? That's what I have written down. It loses you the fight? Damn. For the last few videos, I've done these simulations with max stab monsters to normalize the scale of damage output. This way you can get a really good read on how much damage techs do in relation to each other, and normally what I'm talking about and the damage shown on screen isn't incongruent. And to discuss Death Final accurately, we can only really talk about it in the context of how it functions in a real match. So why is this boilerplate important? Joker and monsters mixed with him have their own battle special called Reel. The theming around Reel is that when it procs, it showcases the monster's real abilities. It gives you bonuses to your damage, defense, guts regeneration, and a bunch of other stuff, and has a chance to proc when your opponent's life bar turns yellow, so when at 25% life or less. It's like an Omni boost you'd get from Ancient Power in Pokemon, and it serves to give you a chance to go for a finishing blow and immediately end the match. It's an incredibly potent battle special, except when it isn't, which is most of the time. When Reel ends, all of the bonuses you get are inverted. Your monster is gassed out and has nothing left after the adrenaline boost of Reel wears off. This more often than not means you've lost. Like, just flat out, you've lost. You take tons of damage and withering, and your guts regeneration becomes so awful that your chances of ever attacking again are close to zero. Your monster missed its opportunity, and the price for doing so is devastating. This is a big part of why Death Final is really especially risky, even more so than the cost and accuracy would dictate. The following clips show Joker with high speed and low defense, the most common type of min-maxing in the competitive 4-stat meta. 50 force is a lot, but without a crit it doesn't actually guarantee a kill. But what it does guarantee most of the time in metas outside of max stats is that it's an almost KO, which leaves your opponent in the yellow. Death Final has a really good chance to proc Reel consistently, and considering you just spent 50 guts, your chances of building up enough guts to fire up a finishing move before Reel wears off are really low. If you manage to somehow land a Death Final with 99 guts, then your opponent is completely dead. So there's no situation where you can proc Reel off a Death Final and still attack soon after. In the hands of the AI, you've gone total monkey mode if you give your monster with Reel a tech that it can also dig itself into an inescapable hole with. This is why Death Slash is your go-to if you want to gamble instead of Death Final. Similar accuracy, still a lot of damage and withering, but it's significantly cheaper. If you proc Reel with Death Slash, you're giving yourself a few seconds of a head start towards the 45 guts threshold, which astronomically increases your chances of victory. The 21 fewer guts that Slash costs are your saving grace, and while Reel is still risky in general, it's not something you can ever avoid completely with Joker, so you've got to make do with the hand you're dealt. The real money is if you happen to proc Reel with one of your basics, as this means you're probably going to win the game, barring a sudden flare-up of Stormtrooper aim syndrome or your opponent procs a grit as your Reel wears out. But even in the latter case, the victory usually comes down to a coin flip, so 50% or better odds in your favor if you punch your opponent into the yellow, and those are damn good odds in Monster Rancher. Death Energy disproportionately benefits from Reel as a boost to its otherwise middling damage all but guarantees a victory if it's used while the buff is active. Reel is big spooky in the Japanese MF2 port and most likely in DX as well due to the removal of the 45 guts threshold needed to attack. A bunch of specific discs spawn monsters with unique guts rates and attributes as in-jokes and references, and there's a whole cast of monsters with access to Reel now that never had it before.
Oh, he gets Reel? I didn't know this motherfucker had Reel! Oh my, no!
I ran a wild Saurian that murdered most of its competition in the Switchport Battle League due to him having extraordinarily cheap tech loadouts and plenty of chances to proc Reel. It's still bad news baseball when it wears off, but if you can build a loadout that not only takes Reel into account but also synergizes with it well, you can make your monster into a real threat. But, yeah, big tangent aside, Death Final is basically just Death Slash, except it's worse in every conceivable context. And that's it for Joker's techs. We're done. He's got the fewest total techs in the game at 6, and only 2 intelligence techs, which runs counter to what his stats would suggest. Despite not having a Withering tech, he has substantial Withering in his kit, regardless of the loadout you decide to build, which I'd argue is much better for his overall goal of getting decently quick KOs and fending off big counterattacks while doing so. A dedicated Withering tech wouldn't really add anything significant to his kit, so while this type of tech would be given to him in later games, it's not really missed much in Monster Rancher 2. With so few techs, you don't really have a lot of room to experiment. Joker scales much better than most other monsters in metas where mixed attackers are viable, but even without that boost, he's still incredibly strong. His power build forgoes Death Final and instead just uses Death Slash for burst damage. His basics do consistent damage and Withering for low cost, so Joker is a monster that is very difficult to beat through Withering. He never spends more than 29 guts to attack, so it's easy for him to get back to 45. His intelligence build is just as simple. The unfortunate reality is you're not able to cover up Death Punch and Smash, and like most off-stat basics, they'll lose you the fight more often than they'll win it for you. But with such high Withering on them, at least you have some auxiliary use in controlling the pace of the match. Death Energy is your main damage source, and Death Cutter gives you a good chance to end the fight quickly should it land a crit early on. If the tournament you're entering allows you to hex edit and remove your basic text, then this really opens up the viability of Intelligence Joker in a big way. The irony of Death Energy is that despite its really great chance to hit, his intelligence build is just not nearly as consistent or as good as just relying on his basics and Death Slash is. An 11 guts rate is a little too slow to reliably run as a tank, but the main boon of running a tank is that with many chances to proc Anger, you'll almost always have a Guts lead, and you can play a very powerful control game due to the 2x bonus it gives to Withering, which Joker sorta does regardless of his ability to absorb hits. 11 Guts is borderline for this defensive style of play, but you might be able to get away with it depending on who your opponents are. Running Anger on a speed build definitely has its merits as well, but runs the risk of proccing at a bad time and giving your opponent an easy chance to hit. Regardless, running a worse-natured Joker to maximize Anger procs and allowing you to build towards another 10% chance to crit with the bad-natured stress bonus is both thematic and very easy for Joker to do. You can always run Power instead of Anger if your Joker is good-natured and you want to avoid the inherent risk, but I personally think Anger is better on him more often than not.
What is going for Roy have power? What the fuck?
I never really talk about mixed attacker builds because stat caps usually force you into a specialty 99% of the time. But if you played Monster Rancher, you know a 99% chance means almost nothing when it really matters. As the meta evolves and monsters with even large techlets come closer and closer to being solved on the same level as Joker, new experimental metas and hybrid stat cap rule sets are starting to bubble up as a way to add a fresh twist on competitive play. Mixed attacker metas are starting to become more popular, but they're still a bit wonky at the moment as people are trying to figure out the best way to balance a brand new way to play. It's an exciting time to be involved in Monster Rancher 2. So if you're entering a tournament with mixed attacker rules, you can really unlock Joker's true potential. You can either pick up every tech except Death Final, or also forgo Death Cutter. Death Energy is the important addition here. You can get some round opening chip damage to force your opponent onto the back foot, use Death Slash for closing out a match early, or last minute comebacks, and your basics for cheap consistent damage, irritating Withering, and a lot of chances to proc Anger on your opponent, which, in conjunction with Death Slash and Reel, can really ruin your opponent's day. Joker is a living example of how a sparse loadout can be oppressive given the right tools. You don't need to, and realistically shouldn't, load up your monster with a dozen techs. When we looked at Zoom, you may have been surprised with how few techs were actually worth grabbing, but Joker really is in its own tier of simplicity. Luckily for fans of the monster, he's incredibly good and wants for nothing in his kit, even with only 6 techs total. I love Halloween, man. This is my favorite time of year, and in no small part due to my birthday being so close. Last year on my birthday, I streamed and tried to beat Monster Rancher 2 blindfolded, and had incentives to limit the amount of time I was allowed to peek at my stream. I got to A rank with a hair, and I'm hoping this year to at least make it Major 4, but we'll see. Also, my keyboard has been dropping inputs occasionally, so that's an entire other level of challenge that I don't know if I'm ready for. And that's on October 27th, so if you like these videos, consider hopping into my stream and saying hi. Also, we're in the final push for the Monster Rancher Battle League, so I'll be streaming really consistently every week until DX comes out. And afterwards too, of course, but you know, the league will be over. I'll be holding tournaments for DX as well and have some more fun stuff coming down the line. Thanks for watching and making me feel like I'm not just shouting this stuff into the ether. When I started this series, I had no idea how much traction I would get. It took my first Rancher Rundown video a week to hit like 100 views, so you have no idea how much I've appreciated this outpouring support. If you're looking for more Monster Rancher stuff between my videos, you should check out my boy MachoCheeze. He also runs tournaments, and you can see my monsters fight there as well. He's hosting some crazy events this fall, including a tournament called the Game Shark Cup, where everyone is encouraged to completely break the game through hex editing. I'm really excited about that one. I've got an absurd build in mind. Let me know in the comments what you want me to cover next. I've created a Patreon where patrons will be able to vote on the next video I put out. You also get out of context screenshots and other small clips and content as I work through the video, and you'll get your name in the credits at the end of all my future videos. So if you like what I'm doing, consider supporting me. Again, I appreciate all the love, and it means the world to me that you folks are as enamored with this busted-ass game as I am. Never would have thought 10 years ago I'd be making videos and speaking with all of you, but I guess the internet's actually good for something after all.